morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you once again to deliver some of my dreams. We're talking about sustainability of the natural resource sector in the West African sub-region. So I want us to quickly look at the West African sub-region, the mineral states of the West African sub-region. And if you look at it, from an exploration point of view, 74%, it's predominantly a gold and diamond sector or region. And I measured this by the exploration that we have here. 74% of our exploration is in gold, and the others in the other minerals. And when you look at it again in terms of mines that we've had, you realize that about 61 operations in gold, which delivers about 9.4% of the global output coming from West Africa. And looking at all these things here, we realize, I just looked at the global supply of other minerals that we give. And rutile, which is titanium oxide, we're given about 22.6% of the global output coming from West Africa. Bauxite, 11.5% coming from West Africa. And uranium, about 5.6% again from West Africa. It tells you, and there are we have numerous minerals coming from West Africa. It tells you how important the West African sub-region is. Lately, we used to have Southern Africa being the #1 gold producer in Africa. But through no fault of theirs, we have managed to overtake them. Strategically, we need to do some more so that we can sustain it. Then I looked at factors required for us to meet the next gen. We are saying that sustainable mining depends on responsible mining. And that is what will give us the next generation of mines in West Africa. But again, in order to have this next generation of mines, we need to look at our relevant mineral and mining policies that are aimed at growth, because the world is moving so fast that to become sustained, you need to grow. And this growth will have to be looked at ways in which we can optimize our returns or our receipts in the region. And I believe that what I try to look at in all this process is to see how attractive our fiscal regimes are aimed at growth. Mineral policies will have to be made. The policies will have to look at our fiscal regimes. When I talk about fiscal regimes, I'm talking about taxes and other levies and incentives that are given to the industry to make them successful. And across the sub-region, it is not proper, I always say, to see a company move, say, from Ghana to Ivory Coast because of the change in fiscal policy. Across the African sub-region, the West African sub-region, there has to be competition, cooperating to compete, because the enemy is out there, it's not amongst us, rather than competing amongst ourselves. If we compete amongst ourselves with policy, at the end of the day, we lose. So those are the things that I'm looking at. And if we are able to collaborate, then we can maximize the mineral receipts and then foreign direct investments that come into the sub-region. We have to also look at policies, that's fiscal regimes that are capacity building oriented. And when I say that, it is how do we promote locals to attain the commanding heights of the economy? Our fiscal regimes would have to look at incentivizing participation of local industries, locals or local companies in the industry. We know our industry is enclaved. And I always say, apart from, say, Sam Jonah who opened up the industry in the 80s, no other person has opened up the industry anymore. So there's a need for us to build that fiscal policy that enables people to join into our industry. We have to be controlling the services industry. It's what we do that will control them. If in Ghana, for instance, 37%, we contribute 37% of our foreign exchange. It tells you how important the gold mining industry is. And if you add the other industries, then that means we must be producing about 40%. We are a relevant force. But how do we get that translated into having commanding heights in the economy? I have also looked at it that the policies that we put in place must incentivize exploration. If you go back to the slide I showed earlier, you realize that I said 74% of the sub-region is exploring in gold. And if 74% are exploring in gold, those are the pathfinders to the new mines. So I argue, and I think I would try to enjoin government to review the whole VAT regime as pertains to exploration, so that we can have more foreign direct investments coming to our country and more people or more exploration companies, engineers coming into our country to look for all the various minerals that we have here. Because the more they come, they give us the path and then they give us the information and build the database that can move us to the next operating mines. And when all these things are done, we need to have a multifaceted sampling system where samples are not just tested for gold, but for other minerals that are available. And this all comes in again into the way we design our fiscal policy. So that the opportunities we have there is that for the sample, we encourage them that you don't only analyze for gold, but you analyze for all the multi-minerals in that sample, and the rest of the information is made available to the government agency, be it Minerals Commission or Geological Survey, to build a database. Once that is done, is another source of making money for the Minerals Commission and Geological Survey. And it all comes out from progressive, growth-oriented fiscal regimes. And this is where I always say it becomes an area of controversy. I, from my personal point of view, having been a miner and been in the industry for quite a while, if our encouragement is for exploration, then let us take the full receipts from operating mines. Full receipts. We review concessions, concession agreements, and take full receipts from the mines. Because the mines will be doing exploration, and therefore they take advantage of the exploration change and then pay us full receipts, and by so doing, I believe that we'll have higher returns and gains for the industry. If that is done, Mines are obviously going to start looking at how they can look at areas to reduce their cost. And if they look at areas to reduce their cost, they become innovative. They bring in new technologies. Though we might even reduce the number of people we take. But if we know that for every mine, every miner, or every person employed in the mining industry, it has a multiplier effect of about 28 people. We reduce the numbers, but we have another times 28 people working out there in the service industries and others. And the multiplier effect is what we have to look at. So, into the next generation, I am basically challenging you, challenging policymakers, that we look at how we can return the best receipts for our countries in West Africa. The next one is, having done all these things, and you've gotten the best fiscal regimes, who makes the decisions? We need to have a policy specially designed to have a good human capital strategy that brings policy experts who are well trained and well experienced to assist in policy formulation. I have always challenged those in the industry to try to move into policy. It is important because it takes time to train in policy, to understand commercially and also strategically. So it's important that you have your few years in the industry and then you move into the policy space. And in order to do that, you need to understand your industrial or technical skills and your commercial capabilities. There are so many experts in the mining industry who are technically super, commercially ignorant. And out there, we work to make money. It's commercial. Everything you do technically, if it does not make you money, forget it. So we cannot just be technically competent without having a lot of commercial ignorance. We need both together. And in this strategy, we also need to look at how we can localize decision-making in the industry. I know my topic is moving into funding, but I'd like to go out there to challenge you and pick your brains. Look at things that we have to do before we get into funding. We have to also enhance local participation in the mineral enclave. I call it an enclave because there are only few people in that space. When I heard my brother Peter talk about the special areas that had been reserved for Ghanaian entrepreneurs, that is fuel and other few areas, no-go areas for foreigners. However, these are Ghanaian companies. How do we define local participation? There is a sort of confusion about what local participation is. Is it locally registered Ghanaian company or is it a locally owned Ghanaian company? Registered ownership are very different. So all these things we have to look at. I pick these things one after the other just to create a bit of challenge in the whole space. And if our decisions are going to be made here, do we make it as locals in the interest of commanding the economy or in the interest of just making money in our own pockets? These things are ethical issues that would have to be addressed and addressed properly by all. The agency theory tends at times to push locals, when given the power to make decisions for themselves rather than for the state. And this is a challenge for the new mine. You would have to move out of it and know that when you work for the state, you get more. There was a WhatsApp that went viral, and the question was very simple. I think Monroe was being interviewed, and was asked. He says that the purpose of creating man by God, people say to worship him, anything. He says to manage what he has given us. The purpose was to manage what he has given us. By managing effectively, we worship him. So our duty is to manage where we are, what he's been given to us. In any position that we stand, is to manage for the state. And when we do that well, then we worship better. And so, I'm looking at what sort of foreign direct investment do we get into our country? What's the local participation and the responsibility for decision making in the industry? Do we have any local direct investment? And then, if we don't, we look at what we have to do. And I try to look quickly at funding in West Africa. There is a lot of competition in funding over the last decade. Funding over the decade basically dropped in West Africa till somewhere in 2017. The competition was more in the Americas, Southern America, and the Eastern European countries. But against all odds, in the mineral industry, when people thought there was no more interest in West Africa, it went up in 2018 and went up to about $16.2 billion in the mineral and mining industry. We realized that because we lump petroleum together, there's more interest in petroleum now, and the little you put in there there's a lot. And the total investment in Africa alone was 46 billion in 2018. However, the reason why we had problems was, again, policy and power. Power you can always resolve because you can bring in people. Policy is what attracts people. And our policies, if it's not uniform across the sub-region, we are going to have problems over the period. We also looked at the local direct investment, and like Minerals Commission said earlier, it's normally it's a paltry percentage, normally limited to local procurement participation. And we realized, like I heard Mr. Iwa say, that they want more locally indigenous local items bought, as against just being local importers and suppliers. But we cannot have these local items bought when there's a non-existent manufacturing base. So the challenge again comes back to us that the next generation of mines should start looking at how do we get ourselves to finance and sponsor local industries. We must identify the things we need, see the advantage we have in the long term, and say if we did them here and span it out off, how much would we get? And I'll tell you an example here. In the 1980s, we didn't have any five-star hotel facility in Ghana. And it was going to be very difficult to get foreign direct investors to come in here and try and invest in the country, because they want to see all these are measures of the growth of the country. What happened was Ashanti Goldfields then, which later metamorphosed to Anglo Gold Ashanti, went into a 22% investment, Labadi Beach Hotel, becoming the first 5-star hotel in this country. And that was a basis of attracting people into the country, because now when they came in, they had a place to stay and they were prepared to work with the country. These are strategic decisions that would have to be taken now for the future. So these strategic decisions can be taken for manufacturing companies. If it's steel balls, we need steel balls for our mines, which is what they're supplying. Western Castings is doing that. So we support Western Castings to come out with the best cost-effective steel ball which we can use here. Is it a foundry? Is it an alloy? We have to do something. And therefore, this is where we have the universities, from a metallurgical point of view, to get their research done well in consultation with the various, that's where I talk about human capital capacity, the various industries and clients or mines to come out with such balls. So it's very important that we look at it from a holistic point of view when we're talking about the future or the next generation of mines. It's not just going there to dig and that's the end. At the moment, what we've done in the past for the last 100 years is to come out and we send everything out. Mine and send everything out. It hasn't changed. What does a new mine intend to do to change this? I am motivated again to look at how we can promote the sustainability of the mining industry, optimize mineral exploration and a return to the shareholders, and have a robust economic return. Here is a problem we have for currently in West Africa. We have a mineral base. We sort of are able to make up with manpower requirements. Where they are absent, we import. What we do not have readily available is finance. And how do we get finance? I have looked at getting a mining investment fund to take advantage of this high growth potential in West Africa. The 74% exploration investment would obviously turn into mines. The exploration needs investment. To unlock the value and improve efficiencies in the mining operations and logistics, we need that investment. And we need to look at all these things to stimulate the growth in the mining industry. So we are proposing that we have a way of deploying capital towards attractive mining opportunities. It's already available for foreign direct investment. But when I bring my money from outside, I want the best returns outside. So how do we get the monies in here? There are so many people who have money and they do not invest in West Africa. When you go to Francophone Africa, West Africa, every investment there is in Paris. Every investment goes to Paris by the locals. Locals don't invest, they invest in Paris. When it comes to Anglophone Africa, Ghanaians don't invest in Ghana, they invest elsewhere. So how do we get them to invest in Ghana? That's why we are looking at if we can have a way of having the West African governments put in about $20 to $50 million into a fund. We have institutional investors who are here in Africa, putting their funds not out there, but into a fund in Africa. I'll tell you an example. The oil money in Ghana, in 2016, we had about 300 million sitting in an account. In that same, the year or two later, there was a mine who was selling part of its shares, and they needed $225 million. We as Ghana, or as Ghanaians, because we did not understand the mining industry, refused to take that money to invest. Meanwhile, the money was sitting out there and only making a return of 1%. And these are the sort of things, these are institutional investors. They have it. We should start looking at means of getting them to come back and look at how we can get money into the economy. So we're also looking at the pension funds. For pension funds to also come in and start looking at this. We have a lot of pension funds that go into real estate. But if we are able to develop our industry, then the real estate funds would also help us, because if we have money, we can then participate in the real estate. One of the reasons why most of the monies that we had was not used, the foreign direct investment was not coming to the mining industry. It was going to real estate and other infrastructure development, because that was felt to give you a better return. We are a mine. We as individuals, for the next generation, must make sure that we understand what we are doing. And in addition to this, if you show what we have, then it will attract foreign direct investment, because then people will be prepared to join your endowment fund, because they know you know what you're doing. So we have to make sure we have money, we have a fund that is viable and can then attract other investments. And once that is done, it comes to management again. What sort of projects are we going to fund? And I've said that our projects should have a 15% internal rate of return and a hurdle rate of 8%. Which means everybody who has every local who wants to get work done must do work before you can get access to the fund. It's not for free. Of course, there are oftentimes I see people come to me with properties. And when you ask them what it is, they do not have a clue as to what they have in the ground. They've not done any financials to it. They've not drilled. They only tell you, I have a mine. You don't have a mine. You have a piece of land. So until we can start drilling our properties, sampling our properties, exploring our properties to get that sort of, and run our numbers to get a hurdle rate of 8%, then you can qualify for the mining investment fund. And we believe that we will need projects which have a period of about 7 to 10 years. In conclusion, for the next generation mines, we should intentionally design local direct investment. It must be intentionally designed by policy. It's not something, it has to be self-generating. We should encourage investment houses or banks to set up mining desk. Because when you go to a bank and you want anything, they do not even understand what it is you're talking about. Banks will have to put up mining desks and have mining engineers and mineral economists. And I repeat, mineral economists. It is not just digging, it is the economy of mining. To man those desks. we should build amongst ourselves the commercial capacity in the industry, in addition to the high-level technical capacities that we have. And if we are able to do that, and we are able to have the policies that cause operating mines to pay as much in their receipts to government, then we will challenge them to look at how they can bring in information technology to be innovative, using information technology, artificial intelligence, and automation to produce. And this would also give us opportunity to learn new things, new trades, and be competitive on the global scale. This all starts from you identifying and beginning to train the human capital needed for the next generation mines. Thank you.